join me for this delicious stuffing made on the stovetop from 1949. It is an easy and fun recipe that you can make really quickly for your Thanksgiving, and I will show you how to make this classic right here on Zero Casualties. Hi, my name is Trista, and I absolutely love old recipes and old recipe books. And I am here to share with you a recipe from 1949. It's out of a cookbook called Out of Kentucky Kitchens. And this delicious recipe, I tweaked it just a little bit by adding a little bit more herbs and spices later on after I tasted it, but it is yummy, and let's dive into the recipe. All right, let's go through the ingredients we need for our Kentucky poultry dressing. So I have 6 slices. I'm doing a half recipe here. 6 slices of bought bread. It says store-bought bread, just sort of torn apart. You don't have to cut them in special pieces or anything. We have a 1/4 cup of, I have salted butter here. These are 2 onions for the half recipe that are chopped up. And then I have 3 ribs of celery with the leaves chopped up. We have 2 eggs that I'm going to crack here in a moment and get them kind of whisked up a bit. And then we have a cup of chicken broth. You can make that any way you'd like. We have a little bit of dried parsley. I did not have fresh, but it's going to be tasty. It's about a 1/2 cup, if that makes sense, about a tablespoon or so. And then for our herbs and spices, we have about an 1/8 teaspoon of sage. And then we have the same amount of poultry seasoning. Then we have thyme and ginger and nutmeg, which are really interesting spices to put in here. And then, of course, fresh ground pepper and some salt. You can use any salt you want. I always use kosher salt just because I like the flavor the best. So let's go on over to the stove and get this recipe started. So our first step is to melt the butter here in a skillet. And once this is melted, we are going to add in our chopped onions. We have 2 chopped onions, and then the celery. And we are going to cook them until soft and yellow, but not brown, the recipe says. So nice and tender is how we want them. So let's get those in there. Oh, shoot. A couple went down on the floor. We'll be cleaning that up later. But let's get all that in there. So I think this recipe is really interesting because it's one that you do completely on the stove. And it's one you would probably actually use to stuff turkey or chicken or that sort of thing, and not just have as a standalone side dish that many of us are used to today. But I am very excited to try this and try some new flavors. I would love to know what kind, if you use the word dressing or stuffing for this. We usually say stuffing even though we don't use it to stuff anything. And usually I would cook it on the stove and then get it in a casserole dish and then bake it in the oven for the second step. So this is really new to me. Once we are done with this step, and these are nice and tender, we're going to be eventually transferring this into a Dutch oven on the stove. So I will come back in a moment once these are nice and softened and sauteed, and we'll go on to our next step. Okay, I want to show you how the onions and the celery look. So they did tinge brown, just tiny bits here and there, but I would not worry about that. They're largely just nice and sauteed and softened, so this is what you want it to look like. I will be back in just a moment to show you the next steps of this yummy dressing. So the next small step is to pour the broth over the bread. And this has already been torn up, of course, here in our bowl. Now I'm used to just mixing it like this. However, this recipe wants you to mash this mixture with your hands to form a paste. So this is what I am going to do. Get it nice and squished up. This is actually quite fun. But before I continue, I'll be wiping my hands off, washing them off a little bit. They are clean as I do this, but anyway, okay. So we have our bread paste here. All right, so I will be back in just a moment to continue with this mixture. Okay, we're gonna add all the rest of our ingredients. So we're gonna add in the celery and onions that we sauteed with the butter. So they are nice and delightfully soft now. I just love the smell of onions and celery, and especially butter. That's one thing that I love to do is put extra butter, usually in my stuffing or dressing. So I might sneak in extra butter after this if it needs it, at least according to me. All right, so let's get that mixed together. Now we want to add in, we have our beaten eggs here. So we're going to be adding that in, which I'm really curious about. And also, let's add in all of our herbs and seasonings. So the parsley, you can either have dried or fresh. The other herbs and spices that we talked about. The sage and thyme and poultry seasoning and nutmeg and ginger. So we want all that in there. And then it says salt and pepper to taste. Each of these is kind of like a 1/4 teaspoon, so I'm going to put 4 of those in there to start. And then just grind some pepper here to maybe equal a teaspoon as possible. But anyway, we're going to taste that later, and we can always add in more seasonings. So this is what it should look like, and it is quite squishy. All right. This is very different than what I'm used to, but I don't imagine it would be great for stuffing a turkey or chicken or something. All right, so we are gonna come back in just a moment and go back to the stove as we're gonna cook this in a Dutch oven. Okay, we're back on the stove here. I'm gonna turn this to kind of a medium heat. And we are supposed to cook this in this Dutch oven until it holds together and seems to leave the sides of the pan. That is what the Out of Kentucky Kitchens book says. It says it should not be dry, but just stiff enough not to run. So I think this step is to kind of solidify it a bit. So let's see what happens. I'm sure it will kind of come together a bit as we cook it. So I'm gonna be cooking this off camera for a few minutes, and we'll come back when it is ready to, well, basically when it's done cooking and we're ready to try it. Oh, one more question I had before I continue cooking this off camera. What do you like in your stuffing or your dressing? What types of breads do you like to use? One of my favorites is kind of a half cornbread, half kind of crusty bread stuffing or dressing that I cook on the stove and then in the oven. I like to add lots of extra butter. That's my secret. So I would love to know in the comments below. Please let me know what you usually make or what your preferred stuffing or dressing is. So I think this is about done. It's solidified quite a bit more. So we're gonna call this good and take it off the stove, and then we will check out how it is. I want to show you a little close-up of the dressing. I ended up adding a little more salt, like a teaspoon more salt, and a little bit more thyme and sage, about a quarter to a half teaspoon each. And I might even season it up a little bit more, just needs a little more seasoning in my opinion. Before we get to the family tasting of this delicious dressing or stuffing, I wanted to show you this book where the recipe came from, Out of Kentucky Kitchens by Marian Flexner. So she collected recipes from a lot of different cooks and restaurants in Kentucky, mostly home cooks and some people from her family. So these are really fun recipes, and as always I have the full recipe and kind of my tweaks to it adapted from the book in the description box, so that will always be fully written out for you to follow yourself at home. And I really hope you enjoy this recipe. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed it, if you like to make dressing or stuffing, and about your Thanksgiving traditions. This will also be part of my Vintage Thanksgiving playlist, so give it a watch and see what other great Thanksgiving recipes are there for you. And make sure to like this video if you enjoyed the content, and subscribe for more weekly vintage videos. Right, my son Adam and my husband Paul and I are ready to taste this different dressing. It's a Southern Kentucky dressing or stuffing like you would have for Thanksgiving. I think normally you would stuff it in the turkey or the chicken or something, but anyway, it's like a stovetop versus oven recipe. It tastes really nice cooled down, actually. It's weird. But I think the flavors really blended well. What are your thoughts? It looks like you enjoy it.
It's really good. It's interesting because the kind of stuffing that we usually have is like, I guess, more solid.
Yeah.
Which I actually kind of like the mushier kind. It's nice.
Yeah, this is a good one.
The only part to me that's weird is it's so soft.
Yes.
That the bits of, I assume, celery and onion seem really crunchy.
Yeah, that is true, because I sauteed them a lot, but you're not supposed to brown them, and so they
not
do seem
bad. I mean, it's delicious.
Yeah, crunchy. Like all the bread is just sort of melded in with everything else. So yeah, different but good.
Adam approved.
Yeah, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
It's tasty.
It is yummy. Thanks, guys.
My pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoy this at home. Happy near Thanksgiving. Bye.